It's a very fine Sunday, except for, the weather, which has been on all our ends, I believe, scorching hot and punishing. But we are trying to persevere. And Joseph and I are hosting today and joined by Michael Roberts. And we will be getting an update about the shape of the global economy. We have plans to discuss the situation in the U.S. and as well as the situation with crypto as well, which should be an interesting discussion. And after that, I think we might do a little bit of news roundup, as always, talking about some current events in the U.S. left around AOC and whatever else is going on. So let's see if anyone's joining us yet.
All I can say is that you've had scorching weather, same here in Europe and Britain. Very scorching, the hottest weather in the history of Western Europe, as recorded. Global warming is really there.
It is.
Sorry, I'm wrong. It's just the weather.
All right. Well, if we want, we can jump right into it.
Yeah.
Start talking about. So a few months. I mean, it's been like 3 months or so now. But we had you on a few months ago to discuss the Liberation Day and the tariffs.
Oh yeah.
Where are we now? A few months in, I think that story's kind of fallen off of the news around here. At least the mainstream news.
If it's fallen off the tariff thing, Trump's range of tariffs and threats and so on that he made. If you remember, on Liberation Day, I think it was April the 2nd, he produced this little chart in front of the White House in which he pointed out all the different percentage of tariff rate increases for different countries, worked out by a formula presented by his advisors, a somewhat nonsense formula. But nevertheless, that was the threat that we're going to huge increases in the tariffs that American consumers are going to pay if that's passed on to them on imports that come into the US from all these different countries, Europe, Canada, China, Mexico, and around the world. After that, over the last couple of months, we've had, first of all, those were removed and then replaced with different ones. And then there was supposed to be a deal with this country and that country on a trade agreement which would set the tariffs. And then they would somehow have been taken off, or they were paused for a month while the negotiations went on. And currently we're in pause mode again. We're waiting for the 1st of August. In between now and the 1st of August, apparently loads of trade agreements with different countries are being worked out, according to Trump's trade secretary. There's going to be a bonanza of trade agreements, I think he said yesterday. And this is all going to happen in the next 10 days. Or if it doesn't happen within the next 10 days, then various countries are going to face, according to Trump, big increases again in the tariffs on their exports into the US. So it's a chaotic process. If we work our way through the ups and downs, Trump withdrawing all of his previous threats and backing down. But if we work our way through that, currently, what's been operating for the last couple of months is an increase in the average tariff rate from most countries, it varies, of course, of around about 14%. Now, before all this started and Trump came into office, the average tariff rate on imports into the US was around 4%. So we've seen quite a significant rise in the average tariff rate, and virtually every country is now being tariffed at about an extra 10% on their exports compared to where they were before. So at the beginning of August, we'll get a clarification again of just how that's going to work out. Key deals have not been signed with key countries, whether it's Canada, Japan, the European Union as a whole. All that is still up in the air. We don't know exactly how that's going to work out. But if we want to look at it, just say that we end up with some sort of increase in tariff between 10 and 20% for most countries. It'll be way higher for China, of course, because China is the bad boy.
They're the target here.
They've got to be dealt with. But we get this average increase. What does it mean? Well, I think it means, first of all, and we can lead into other questions as well in the US itself. But first of all, what does this mean? First of all, will these increases in the cost or the price of the goods coming into the US because of the tariffs be passed on by US importing companies into the shops, into Walmart, and onto our bills every day, whatever it is, whether it's computers, TVs, food, whatever. It's difficult to say. I've looked at all what the economists say, and they all don't agree about how much of this will be passed on. Has it already led to any increase in the inflation rate? Well, again, that economists disagree, but it would seem the very latest inflation rate we just got out of the US last week saw an uptick in the inflation rate. The average consumer price inflation rate increased to just under 3%. So instead of going towards 2%, which viewers may know is the aim of the Federal Reserve, it wants to get inflation down to a 2% average rate. And it will, if that's the aim of the Federal Reserve, it says that's a reasonable, moderate inflation rate. And so the war against inflation, as they've called it, has been aimed at trying to get that down with the high interest rates that Americans have had to suffer over the last couple of years, the same in the UK. But now the inflation rate is not heading towards 2, but it's heading back over 3. So that would imply that perhaps these tariff increases are beginning to have an effect. They are being passed on. And most people say that actually these tariff increases won't really come and hit the prices until the next month, August and September. So we shall see whether that's going to be absorbed. If it's absorbed by the importers, that means their profits will fall. So they will be squeezed on their profits, and they will have to look perhaps at reducing their investment, perhaps in laying off workers because the costs are too much in relation to what they can earn on this. So we could see a tick up in unemployment. So you've got it this way. If they don't absorb the tariff increases, there'll be an increase in inflation. If they do absorb it, there'll probably be an increase in unemployment. Actually, the last figures for unemployment are also up. So we're beginning to see the stress on the US economy, which existed before. I want to make the point that the US economy was already slowing down. It already was in a position where investment was slowing down, where although corporate profits have been good, corporations, apart from the Magnificent Seven, haven't been investing at all, and their profitability has been weak. So the stress is increasing. Interest rates are high for borrowing, not just for us Americans and borrowing things to buy things, but for companies as well. Huge borrowing costs have been relatively high, makes it much more difficult to invest. So that stress is going to increase, I think, over the next few months, and we'll see then whether it leads perhaps to what I think we're going to have at least a stagflationary situation in the US economy. What do I mean by that? That means that the economy is more or less stagnating. It's in GDP terms, in national output terms, it's not increasing. It's just about staying where it is. The latest forecast for this quarter just ended at the end of June is an increase of probably about 1.5% of rate of growth. The first quarter was negative. US economy actually fell. There could be a bit of an increase in the second quarter, but overall, it's beginning to stagnate alongside an increase in inflation. So you get what the old word of stagflation. The economists like to have trendy words to put the two things together. And that's the implication of what the direction we're going. It could be worse than that. It could be that there could be pressure towards an outright recession in the US economy towards the second half by the end of this year. We shall see. I'm not convinced that's the case because corporations, the big ones, are still making very good profits, so they're not really feeling the heat yet. The banks have having good profits because interest rates are up, so they're not feeling the heat. So maybe we won't move into a recession yet, but the pressure is downwards on growth and the pressure is upwards on inflation. So this is the situation that Trump has left us with his tariffs. Now that brings me to the next point. What was the purpose of the tariffs? Well, the purpose of the tariffs, apart from trying to kick every other country in the world because they've been horrible to America, the other point was Trump believes that he can use tariffs, the money he gets out of tariffs that go into the federal government's purse as a result of charging tariffs on imports. This can allow him to cover the huge deficits which exist on the budget for the American federal government, and also for state governments as well, who've got real problems. And he thinks the tariffs can do that. Well, we've had the budget, the big, beautiful bill, which I have to say is only in the eye of the beholder, that beauty. And my beholder tells me it's very ugly and not very nice for various reasons. But the thing is, first of all, let's take it from Trump's point of view. This is not going to cover the gap on the budget deficit, these tariff increases. We're talking about just under $2 trillion deficit this year. And that's not going to be covered by a tariff increase, if they're lucky, of $300 billion over the year. So this increase in tariffs, which he trumpets, is not going to be covered by this deficit. So the debt for the federal government is going to continue to rise. And according to projections, it's at around about 100% of annual output at the moment, the gross debt. That's the amount of debt built up by the federal government over years, which they have to service by issuing bonds and treasury bills and paying the interest on the old bonds and treasury bills that they've already issued. So it's likely to go from 100% of GDP, if nothing's done, by the end of Trump's administration, and of course, before he starts his third administration, which is inevitable, I suppose, by 2029, it's going to go to 120, 125% of GDP. Now, this is getting big. This is really worrying the financial sector. Who is going to cover this deficit? How interest rates will inevitably rise. The yields on bonds, that means that the government issues a bond, but it's going to have to you're going to have to pay people to buy this bond. You're going to have to pay them more in interest than it usually does. I mean, the old bonds, maybe you get 2 or 3% a year if you buy a government bond. Now around about in the secondary market, that's the buy and sell market, it's about 4.5%, depending on how long the bond's maturity is. It could rise even further. This is a serious hit to the fiscal position of the federal government. Of course, the government, just to present point, the government could just print dollars to cover it. It doesn't have to worry about this.
Right.
Sense. But if it massively imprints dollars and tells the Federal Reserve, oh wait, give us $1.8 trillion, please, just print the dollars and we'll put it in the government's bank deposits, deficit gone, that is a massive boost of money, dollars into the economy without any corresponding increase in production as a result of that. And that really is quite an inflationary environment. And also foreign investors, who constitute about 30% of the buyers of federal government, say, Jesus Christ, this would mean a severe worry about whether the federal government and the dollar was worth what it's supposed to be worth. And they would not want to hold dollar assets. And we've already seen a reduction in their enthusiasm for dollar assets since Trump came in, which is one of the reasons why dollar's fallen a bit over the last few months. So that's where we are as we head to August the 1st. They're going to get a new tariff regime. It's going to be higher. It's not going to cover the fiscal deficit, and it's not going to in any way really transform the US economy. So what happens after that? Well, I'm sure rabbit will come out of the hat from the president, because he has plenty of those hidden in that hat, and sometimes he takes them out and sometimes he puts them back.
Yeah, I mean, his going back and forth is not inspiring a lot of confidence. It's, as you said, it's very chaotic, and there's no real sense of what Trump is going to do next. But just to segue on some of what you said, because you mentioned U.S. Treasury debt and the dollar weakening, it's actually, I think, the lowest it's been at the dollar. That is the lowest it's been in 3 years, according to the dollar index. Yields are rising yet again because of the tariffs and the this deficit that they just passed into law. what would you say are the implications for like the average worker? Not so much the financier who is worried about it because of their profitability, but what is
they're holding all these bonds and they're going to lose money. So we're not too worried about them in that sense. But first of all, I think I'd say, yes, the dollar is down at a 3-year low. But if you went back 15 years or 10 years, it's not down very much. We have to remember it dramatically rose in the period, particularly post-COVID, and also post-Great Recession in 2009, because the dollar became the safe asset that everybody wanted to hold in crises. So in the great slump of 2008-9, the dollar went up. In the COVID slump, the dollar went up because people wanted to hold dollars. They wanted to hold gold as well, these financial investors, but everybody wanted to hold dollars rather than euros, where Europe was in a complete mess and so on, and or any other currency. So it was relatively high historically. But thanks to Trump, he's managed to drive it down to a 3-year low, and because people are less confident that the dollar is such a safe and a currency to hold their assets in. We're talking about the big financial investors, the governments, companies, and so on. But we mustn't exaggerate the collapse of the dollar. I've heard this argument. The dollar has not collapsed. It's not become a secondary currency. The euro is not going to replace it. I heard President Lagarde of European Central Bank the other month said, this is an opportunity for the euro to become the leading currency in the world. What a joke. Have you ever seen the state of the European economy? No chance. If the US has got problems, the European economy's got them just as much, if not greater. So the idea that is going to replace the US dollar, I think, is wishful thinking at the very best. But it's true that this decline in the dollar is the result of these policies that Trump has adopted, and also the slowdown of the US economy. The US economy was doing better than all the other major economies for right up until this last year or so. But now it's slowing down to maybe 1.5% growth rate, while Europe is about 0.5%, Japan's 0.5% or 0. The UK is doing fantastically at 0. All these major economies are slowing down, but the US is sort of joining them at a different pace. And that weakens their currency relative to other currencies and relative to gold or relative to other assets that people like to hold, like speculators like to hold crypto now as an alternative.
Yeah. And now that since you've mentioned crypto, this is something that I've been thinking about recently, but how much would you say, because it seems to me that, like you said, the economy slowing, you envision a situation or a possible situation of stagflation if it continues to happen. One thing that I've been sort of, thinking about is how much of this, the Trump administration has become really proactive, I guess, or some may say obsessed with these crypto regulations that they're trying to pass. And, how much of that is them? How much of that is the administration sort of, one, shoring up weak U.S. bond demand? Because it seems that, like you said, foreign investors no longer want to buy U.S. bonds or support them. And how much of that is sort of the drive from capital generally for more profit? If the economy is stagnating, I would imagine that U.S. profit rates are also declining.
Yeah. Well, what's the Shakespearean phrase? Before something happens, people first go mad. What we have here is a new form of asset, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, the most famous one. But would you believe there are 1,000 cryptocurrencies?
Oh yeah, no, it's very easy to make one. Like I could probably make a new one right now if I wanted.
I'm surprised there aren't more, honestly.
I could make a Cosmo coin. We could make a Cosmonaut cryptocurrency if we wanted.
Yeah, and you could
make a Michael Roberts cryptocurrency if you wanted.
Yeah, well, we have the Donald Trump stable coin, of course.
Yeah,
we'll get onto those in a minute. And other people have currencies with memes like little dolls and God knows what else, animals. But anyway, the big one is the Bitcoin, which was the first and biggest. And this is a digital currency, guys, which you can buy or sell decentralized. You don't go through a bank to it. You do it on the computer like we are now, and you go onto the site and you can try and buy the Bitcoin and backwards and forwards, and it will produce a Bitcoin. Somebody's out there with a massive great data center in the middle of God knows where, delivering an extra Bitcoin in order to meet this extra demand. So this is a new form of asset. Now, this asset is in all these assets, the cryptocurrencies, are speculative assets. Originally, when Bitcoin was launched or cryptocurrencies talked about under Sakamoto, who said, we look, this is a decentralized system. We don't need the banks. We don't need the government. This is freedom for everybody to have their own currencies and transactions. And we are free at last. The tech freedom is here. And that this is the opportunity for us to break with the government. And a lot of lefties went along with it. Well,
have you read that article, The Californian Ideology? You know,
no, I haven't, but is it something similar like that?
Yeah, it was written in the early 90s, and it's kind of about this kind of decentralized, libertarian, tech utopian ideology that gets big in Silicon Valley. And it's the cryptocurrency thing in that period is very much a reflection of that kind of Californian.
And it's also the idea that this currency could replace the existing state-run currencies.
Right.
Dollar, we can have Bitcoin. It's going to be a currency, but you can buy and sell. And there were, there used to be telling machines for a while. You could get crypto out of it, or at least whatever. Even some certain small governments like El Salvador actually launched cryptocurrency in an attempt to replace the dominance of the dollar in their economy. Nigeria, I think, is still trying that. So that you have the idea that there could be a currency. Well, it is not. These are not currencies, are they? People cannot go to Walmart with a Bitcoin. And they won't be able to do so for two reasons. First of all, there's only a certain number of Bitcoins. It's a restricted currency. It's not one that you can expand indefinitely. But secondly, the price of Bitcoins have been incredibly volatile. And they could be just $8. It started at $8 to each Bitcoin. Then now it's 120,000, but it's been up and down all over the place. And immediately I say it's measured in its relation to the dollar gives the game away, really, because everybody still looks at everything in terms of dollars or euros. So the Bitcoins are only valuable if they tell me what the value of the Bitcoin is. Or it's $120,000 a Bitcoin. Oh, well, thank you very much. So it's a question of dollars, isn't it? Let's convert it into dollars, and then I can use it in Walmart, or I can use it whatever I want. I can't really use a Bitcoin anywhere except with other Bitcoin people. I might be able to do a bit of business. Or now the new line is that all companies are going to have Bitcoins or their own coin, and you can operate with their coin. JP Morgan's going to present their alternative coin. So you can, if you've got an investment in JP Morgan, you can have it in their coin. And then if you want to sell it to somebody else who's also a JP Morgan customer, you can just do a transaction in their coin, and you don't have to touch dollars or anything. Well, that's a great help, isn't it? I mean, it's a bit like saying you go to the tennis tournament and you resell your ticket, but that's all the ticket's worth. You can't take it outside the tennis tournament and use it as a currency. These private currencies will never be in universal currencies, which could be used in replacing the dollars and becoming real money. So what are they? They're speculative assets, just like gold, just like all the stock market, looking for ways of making money by buying and selling things. But our great president, Donald Trump, who used to call cryptocurrencies a complete scam when he was in Trump 1, now in Trump 2, we should all pitch into the crypto coins. And by the way, I have my own crypto coin, stable coin, which you might like to buy. And my wife, Melania, also has one. And my two sons have also got some. So you want to buy those, it's only $90,000 a coin, and you'll be in wonderful land because you'll be in Trump coin. What could be better? So this is just a scam on their part to make money individually for the family. But let's make sure that it's not a scam, because we'll get the US Congress to pass a legislation called the Genius Act, which makes this perfectly okay. So everybody can invest in this, and it's going to have some regulation. Don't worry, the Federal Reserve will check that nobody's cheating you. and going bankrupt, although the litany of bankruptcies and fraud conducted with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is just getting longer and longer. The famous one is St. Banks-Friedman, and I could name a few others who have just ripped people off by this scheme. But don't worry, now it's going to be regulated, and therefore you can really pitch in. It's a genius idea, isn't it? A genius act to make it. So this is just an example of the total froth now which exists in capitalism, particularly in US capitalism at the top, where we're not making investments productively in things that people need and services that they require. We're just rolling this money, this currency or non-currency around a system by which people hope to make money by buying and selling, not by producing anything. And this is just the extreme example of it. We've had others, and we'll probably have some more while this boom continues. As we talk about the US economy slowing down, the stock market's at record highs. And stable coins and Bitcoins and all the others are at record highs. This demonstrates to me that a huge amount of fictitious cash, which doesn't really exist when it comes to delivering on production and things that we need, is just multiplying at a much faster rate than anything else. And that's where it all goes. And we have an administration which thinks this is just great.
Yeah, I guess what I find bizarre about it is that you have the big like financial players getting into it, like the big, the biggest banks and whatever. To me, that seems weird because it's sort of like it's hard. It's going back to a pre-Federal Reserve system of like private money, like all of these different mutually exclusive currencies. Why would they be interested in something like this? It seems that like my personal belief is that it's a way of shoring up their own declining profits, but I actually don't know. But why would financial institutions, the biggest one, be interested in playing with this monopoly money?
I think you're right, Joseph. I mean, let's face it, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, all the rest, they're smart cookies. Oh, this is taking off. We can make a buck out of this if we launch our own coin or we provide a service to make it work. Let's get the government to approve regulations so it all looks nice and smooth. It'll join all the other speculative assets that we like to offer, even works of art or memes and all the rest of it, as part of the process of trying to get money from money. Because you're making money out of money. You're not making money out of producing anything or providing a service that people need. It's making money out of money. This is the classic nature of what Marx called fictitious capital. Yes, it's profits. Yes, it's capital, but it's fictitious. If it has to be realized in the terms of the value of production in the society, then it would collapse. But you make money while the going's good, and I can assure you that these particular banks and companies who are launching maybe their own coin, or they're going to provide the service to do so, and the stable coins, that's a way in which you can transfer your cryptocurrency into a US dollar, or so in fact it demonstrates why you need a stable coin. They'll make money out of this for while it lasts, and if it collapses, it'll be the poor old suckers, the consumers who bought this stuff. It won't be them that takes the hit on the whole. If it does, if they really take a hit on this could be quite damaging for the financial system as well. So there is a certain risk in this development of this speculative stuff, just as we saw in 2008, when we had all these incredibly exotic, what we call derivatives. So you had mortgages, and then you get a derivative of the mortgage, which you sell a derivative of the derivative to everybody, and goes round in a circle. And then when nobody can pay their mortgages, which is what happened in 2008, the whole thing implodes. Bitcoin and the cryptos aren't anywhere near as big as the housing market of the US. So that's not the threat that we have. But nevertheless, it's another indication that fictitious capital leaves its mark upon the real economy if it starts to collapse.
Yeah, I mean, housing and crypto. Housing is something that, I think people rely on a lot, whereas crypto is kind of, almost like a subcultural thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of one thing about it that is the way that crypto is kind of a way of showing allegiance to this kind of libertarian ideology. Like if you have crypto and you invest in crypto, it kind of shows that you're like part of this community of like, it's just kind of, there's kind of an ideological aspect to it. And you know, the Trump administration are also really big on like deregulating sports betting.
Yes.
So I feel like there's almost like this strange kind of twisted economic populism to it, to where we're not going to actually deliver like real economic, welfare or whatever to the working class, but we're going to give them crypto and sports betting as like,
Well, one of the features of the Genius Act was to ban a government cryptocurrency or a Federal Reserve central bank currency.
Right.
So we don't want
I
to.
think China is actually looking into, as they were kind of trying to make like a state-backed like.
We don't want a state-backed digital currency, cryptocurrency. We only want private ones. We don't want government interfering, and we want to make it as light touch regulation as possible. But basically, people can cheat you without really being dealt with. So that's the philosophy, as you say, and it's a philosophy. We just noticed in our just it's a bit of a sideline talking about sports that you had a soccer tournament called the Club World Cup based in the US. It was finished off. The final was in New York, and there was a European team and two European teams in the final. And Trump went to this thing. I mean, what does Trump know about soccer? So why is he interested in going? I mean, it was a huge, great thing. And whoever won it, at the end, they had the celebrations and the cups passed around, and the medals are passed around. And it turns out that one of the medals apparently was missing, and Trump had purloined it. He'd put it in his pocket and take it back to the Oval. He'd also insisted that the International Football Association produce the cup for the tournament. For him, he said, I want it sent to the Oval. You can get a replica for the footballers. So they've got a replica, and he's got the original in the Oval, or at least it's still in the Oval. Maybe it's now down in Trump Tower. We don't know. But the implication here is that look, sport's big, and I'm going to be there, and we can make money out of this, and I'll be able to establish myself as a sort of sporting impresario around the world. Bit like the Saudi Arabians are trying to whitewash everything they do by buying every sporting tournament in the world. So Trump's another one of this. So it's more fictitious nonsense, isn't it?
Somebody in the chat says Trump also says he's smart because his dad was smart at the time he told people to drink bleach.
And do you remember the face of the medical person who was sitting behind him at the time? Grimaced.
Yeah.
But those days of fun, it's not so funny now that he's doing the things that he's doing, is it?
Yeah.
We're not
I just saw this, by the way. It says the president's wealth could be boosted by as much as 100 million this week by his meme coin. Meanwhile, his administration is adopting crypto-friendly policies left and right. So, yeah, I guess it is working out well for Donald.
Yeah. And probably for Goldman Sachs and the others for a while.
Yeah, just to follow up on some of the ideological aspects, like I think there is definitely like a political allegiance that people have out of, they buy crypto because they support the administration or whatever. I think the other part to it is the ideology of getting rich quick, which is pervasive in crypto. I think everyone in crypto thinks that it's gonna go crazy and you're gonna be able to quit the drudgery of your job or whatever. I think part of this is also driven by the fact that investment in equities like stocks have become increasingly like as asset prices rise and rise and rise, it becomes less affordable for people to actually buy into the stock market. So that traditional, escape valve for people is now becoming, not feasible. And crypto, I guess, represents that in a new form for people.
It's a lottery, isn't it? It's like buying lottery tickets. People want to change their lives. Maybe it'll come up. Maybe the 3 cherries will come up. I'll be free of this drudgery and toil. And this is an easy way. I just get a computer, I buy a few coins, and watch them go up, shooting up. And some people have made huge amounts of money, haven't they? There's always winners. Unfortunately, the vast majority of people will be losers.
I guess I wanted to talk, unless you have a question, Donald. I guess I wanted to talk about like, the third world BRICS, and because in one of your recent blog posts, you kind of threw cold water on the idea that with a weakening dollar, the BRICS could, I guess, catch up to the rest of the imperialist core.
Yeah. Well, economically, Joseph, they're not going to catch up, in my view. I mean, when we talk about the BRICS, for viewers, we're talking about the biggest global South economies, the biggest economies outside the advanced capitalist economies in Europe, the US, and Asia. We're talking about, beyond that, we've got the biggest economy. Which are they? Well, obviously China, India, Brazil, Russia, South Africa to some extent. There are others joined the BRICS Plus, as they call it now, which is Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, well, they haven't quite joined, Iran, a couple of others. So if you look down that list, those are big economies. They've got big populations. They're not, so they're to be reckoned with in terms of population. But in terms of GDP, national output, they're generally not that big, apart from China and India. The others are relatively small compared to the US. And the US has 350 million Americans, approximately. China has 1.4 billion people. India, the same, if not more. Indonesia, I think 700 million, something massive. These are hugely populated areas, but their GDPs are not much bigger than the US. And there's only one country that's bigger than the US. And even that's maybe marginal. That's China in terms of GDP. So per person, their national output is really much, much lower than the average American. Of course, there is no average American, as we know, because inequality in America is so wide, so huge, that the average American is just nowhere near the top American when it comes to income or wealth. And that applies to other countries, of course. But the average difference between the BRICS in terms of GDP and living standards is way, way lower than it is in the North. Will that gap ever be reduced or met? Will those countries catch up? Well, if you look at if you just extrapolate the growth rates of all these countries, slow down in the North, bit of a quicker growth in the South, how long would it take for these countries to catch up per head? Well, I've worked it out in a recent paper, and I reckon it would take China to reach the same level as US would be about 2045 if China continues at the rate it's growing now. But no other country would get there. They wouldn't get it. They would never catch up on the current trajectory. So that means something's got to change for these countries to end their poverty, to have a standard of living which is equivalent to what we see in Europe and North America. Something has got to change. And the two things that are stopping them as well are precisely what's going on in the capitalist countries of the North. They are using their big companies to extract huge amounts of profit from the global South. And the global South companies are increasingly falling in profitability, so they can't invest so much and catch up. It's a situation that cannot be resolved under the present structure of our society. So if we continue with world capitalism, an imperialist bloc in the North and the BRICS in the South, nothing will change. It will not close that gap. So the argument that BRICS can come together and somehow change the situation would be great news if they could do that. They could restructure the world economy by combining in a bloc, and they would start trading together, using their resources together, working together, financing each other. Perhaps that would make a difference. But I would just say this to viewers. Who are the heads of the BRIC countries? We start off with President Putin of Russia. We then move on to the mullahs in Iran. We then go to a fairly pinkish, leftish, rather feeble government in Brazil, who has only just replaced a really right-wing Trumpist government in Brazil. We go to South Africa, which who has the highest levels of inequality of wealth and income in the world, despite get rid of apartheid. We go to China, which has no democracy. We go to India, where Modi operates basically a racist policy against minorities in society. Are these leaders which are capable of having an internationalist view, which will organize working people to use their resources to benefit them all? I don't think so. So what will happen is nothing will change. These economies may grow faster, but they won't catch up.
So in reality, it seems to be like a struggle between competing economic hegemonies. But you know, it's one that isn't going to actually change the structure of the global economic system.
But also, Joseph, that it's not even a competing hegemony. These economies are resisting the hegemony of the US imperialism and the Europeans. It's to varying degrees, but they're not really going to be able to create their own hegemony, in my view. They won't be able to combine action. I mean, China is a real threat to US imperialism, both, as we discussed before in previous interviews, through its manufacturing base, its technology, its trade. It's moving forward at a dramatic pace. But only China. And that's why China is singled out all the time by not just Trump, but I can assure you, over in Europe, the anti-China attitude on the part of the leadership of these countries is just as strong, just as nasty in terms of trying to deal with China. And the medias, they spend millions every year trying to find anything they can find wrong with China. Of course, there's lots of things wrong with China, but they don't spend that money on finding things wrong with Israel or finding things wrong with their own countries. No, because the purpose of the exercise, of course, is to try and convince working people around the world that China is the big enemy alongside Mr. Putin, and that if we can deal with that, then we can turn these, then America will be great again, and we can save the world for capitalism.
I think I have one comment. I mean, there was a YouTube comment I wanted to bring up, but I think China possibly doesn't want to replace the world reserve currency because it would mean their economy would become too dominated by finance.
Yeah,
and that's not in their interest, according to how they understand things, which I think is correct. I mean, I
agree with you. Yeah, they could see they have a closed currency, if you like. They have capital controls. You can't buy and sell renminbi, which is the Chinese currency, freely in the markets like you can the dollar, and that's deliberate. They don't want a massive outflow of money because China has a big capitalist sector. They have banks, they have private companies. They could swing the money out of the country in no time at all. The Chinese state won't allow that. And they're not going to allow their currency to dive and the economy to suffer as a result. So they maintain capital controls. And while they do that, they can't possibly be a rival to the dollar internationally. Lots of bankers in China like to say, yes, we've got to get rid of capital controls. This is an element, by the way, they've all been trained in the Western universities and moved back to the People's Bank of China when they say this. But it's not a policy that the leadership is prepared to accept.
So we have someone who says, so you don't believe in the success of Chinese efforts to increase internal consumption?
Oh, definitely, I do. If he means, I mean, there are two answers to that. The first answer is, it's often argued that the Chinese state concentrates on investing more in manufacturing, in trade. It doesn't raise the consumption levels of its people. Well, we've already discussed its consumption levels per person are obviously much lower than they are in the US. But of all the countries in the world, the increase in consumption per head is greatest in China compared to other countries. So when you invest more, when you produce more, when you trade more, you earn more resources, output rises, and you can therefore inevitably, people, if they've got jobs and their wages start to rise, and they have risen quite a lot in China, then people spend more. So the consumption growth rate in China is very high. Consumption as a level against the rest of the world, or the big countries in the north, is still relatively low. It's about 30% of the US. But it's growing much faster than it is in the US. US consumption is crawling. Chinese consumption is growing at about 6 to 8% a year. But I think the question also secondarily means that there's a lot of talk in the Western press that Chinese are not increasing consumption fast enough. They're over-investing. and they should spend more on consumer goods, and so on. And that if they don't do that, then the economy is going to just slow down and collapse or stagnate. That's the new argument. Used to be that China was going to collapse every year. Now they're going to stagnate because they haven't allowed the consumption sector to grow fast enough. Well, it's partly not true, but also they've got new measures. They're trying to boost consumption and so on with various methods and so on. But in my view, they don't need to push too hard on that area, because the history of growth in any economy is if you grow, you can grow faster if you invest more. If you invest more, you'll grow fast, employment will go up, and then consumption will follow. I don't know of any economy that's grown from poor levels to rich levels by consuming more. Think about it. If you consume everything you produce, then you go and grow faster. It's an illogical argument. It's incredible that mainstream economists should present this argument on a daily basis as an explanation of what's wrong with China, that they're not consuming enough and they should stop investing. Well.
Oh, it's like this weird hang up from the fall of the Soviet Union, where like bourgeois economists have this obsession where like, oh, the Soviets failed because they didn't focus enough on consumers, and this is
Well, I mean, the central planning of the Soviet Union, maybe that did have a certain effect, that they were able really to adjust to the consumer needs of the population. And also, by the end of the Soviet Union, the level of extraction of the surplus by the state machine, partly for the arms race,
right,
and partly because the bureaucracy was so paralytic by then that this has created a situation that at the moment does not exist in China, in my view.
It really just sounds like what they're complaining about is China is not a economy with the same consumption patterns that the U.S. has, where people put themselves into debt to consume.
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, anyone I know who's gone to China recently tells me you can see the abundance and you can see that people's living standards are going up and that people are living better.
Yeah, of course, there are inequalities. The rural areas are still much poorer than the urban areas. Not everybody can move to the urban areas.
Yeah, no, you can still see the differences for sure.
Yeah. I mean, this is not a perfect socialist economy, in my view. It's a fast-growing, state-run, state-led, planned economy with a sizable capitalist sector. It's just a weird beast, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely a strange social formation.
But it's a formation which has worked up to now, and therefore it's got to be stopped.
So we have another question related to China and the U.S. debt. It says, can you ask whether he thinks the U.S. might default on the debt to China, and if there's any other alternative to the U.S. dollar as a global currency with their abuse of it?
Well, China owns quite a bit of U.S. treasuries, or U.S. debt, if you like. Not a huge amount compared to their own economy. They got foreign exchange reserves. The Chinese are 3 trillion. They haven't got anywhere near that amount of money held in U.S. debt. And what they have got in U.S. debt is increasingly treasury bills. For those who are not clear, treasury bills of short-term debt, so they're about 3 or 6 months. So that means after 6 months you get your money back from the U.S. government. So you don't get much interest on it if it's just a short time, but you can turn that over. So it's almost like money, because it's such a short period of time. And their holdings of long-term debt, what we call treasury bonds in the US, like 10 years or 30-year bonds, is relatively small, and it's been shrinking. They have been reducing their amount that they hold in those sorts of bonds. So I don't think that the US could destroy the Chinese economy by defaulting on paying the Chinese their debt. Let me a simple example. In the Russia-Ukraine war, Russia held a large proportion of their FX reserves in Europe, in a clearinghouse in Belgium, $300 billion worth of FX reserves. That was frozen and not given back to the Russians. The Russians have lost it all. Europeans are trying to spend it themselves, which they haven't yet got round to doing. But if you freeze, if you take the money out, if they were like a sort of default on what you're supposed to owe, if you're a bank and I went to the bank and I said, "Oh, can I take my money out?" "No, you can't. You can't have it anymore. We've taken it." That default is what happened to Putin's Russia, but they're not dead. They continue to function as an economy. Not good, and I don't think in this case, the Chinese would in any way be in a problem if the US tried to default on their debt. What it would do would dramatically increase the risk for other countries. Bloody hell. Trump's government is defaulting on the Chinese debt. Are we next? Japan, are we next? Europe, are we next? No. That would be a disaster for the US fiscal regime.
Yeah, no, I think China could weather through the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution, the the Deng Xiaoping's reforms. So I think they could handle the storm of that being defaulted on.
It's not going to be easy because these tariffs are going to be nasty for Chinese trade. So they have to diversify to other countries. They have to try to go around hide it, export it to Bangladesh, and then Bangladesh export it to the US. All kinds of tricks the Chinese will be engaged in trying to maintain their export trade, which is still rising, by the way, despite it falling to the US. But it's not going to be easy for China. This is obviously going to damage, to some extent, Chinese growth. The question is, who's going to get damaged more? Is it going to be the US or China over the rest of this administration?
One thing I wanted to ask you about a little bit is Russia and kind of what their place in the global economy is, because...
Well, it's not a small economy. Its GDP is now, I think, 5th or 6th in the world. It's slightly higher than the UK's now. So we're talking about its national output is fairly large. It's a middling economy, a middling capitalist economy. It's not a huge economy, and it's not a hugely high in living standards either. It's better than most of the global south because I have to say that for whatever you might say about Soviet Union and Soviet planning, the tremendous growth of Russia also took place under Soviet planning from 1917 right for 100 years, dramatically increased the living standards and conditions for working people and the economy in Russia, which never existed before. It came from nowhere to a reasonable sized economy, and that's still the case now. Having said that, it's an economy which is far too dependent upon energy production and exports, whether it's oil, gas, and other resource minerals. Its manufacturing base is not unimportant, but it's not significant, and it's not technologically progressing in the same way that China's is. So it's an economy which is strong enough to resist a lot of pressure from imperialism, but it's not strong enough to defeat imperialism or build an alliance which could do that. And of course, it's led by a thug. So, and a regime which is only interested in Russian nationalism. It wants to make Russia great again.
Right.
Where have we heard that before? It's not big enough to make itself great again, but it's big enough to be a resistant power against the interests of imperialism. So it remains an economy. Economically, it has survived during the Ukraine war reasonably well. This year looks a little bit trickier, but it's had actually growth for the last 3 years since the 22 invasion by Russia in Ukraine, contrary to what the Western economists said. They said it was going to collapse within 3 months. That hasn't happened. But it's the cost of the war is burning into the productive sectors of the economy. And there are problems in terms of inflation. War economies tend to have inflation, and they tend to create situations where interest rates are high, squeeze workers' living standards. That hasn't happened yet, but there's increasing danger of that over the next year or so. If we're going to say, will it survive? Can it go on fighting this war in Ukraine? I say yes. You could go on for 2-3 years without having a serious crisis. How long the Europeans are going to go on financing Ukraine remains to be seen.
Right. I guess my wonder with Russia is, are they kind of trying to jumpstart into becoming an imperialist power in this case, and is this kind of part of a kind of, maybe Putin started out kind of just trying to ingratiate himself to the West and
well, he has.
into NATO. But now he's trying to start his own kind of nationalist project of.
Yeah, they have a national interest. The Russian capitalist and the ruling class, they don't want to. They were humiliated. They've been humiliated.
Right.
And they weren't allowed. They wanted to join NATO. They wanted to be part of Europe, and they were told to F off. And because they were humiliated. So they've recovered. Their economy's recovered, and Putin has the idea that Russia's not a reasonably important power, and also all the peripheral countries around the border of Russia should be under their influence. So it's these countries, Belarus, Ukraine, Georgia, Azerbaijan, whatever it is, all these have got to be Russian influenced countries.
So Ruski Mir.
Yeah, not Western European influenced countries that might actually act against Russia. We need this buffer. This should be our little greater Russia. We're not going to take them over. They're not going to. They just want to make sure they've got regimes or governments which are pro-Russian and that they operate within the Russian orbit. That's his aim. The West doesn't want him to have that, and the West wants to go further, or not just get rid of that periphery, but he wants to get regime change in Russia. He wants a pro-Western government in Russia. He wants to drive Putin out, replace him with nice, obedient, pro-Western Russian leaders and government. And that so far has been resisted.
What would you say is the capacity for Russia to engage in imperialist development? It seems to me that probably not very.
Not very, no. I mean, as I say, they got their immediate borders. Yes, they can probably control Georgia. They can do all those, and if then any Georgians don't like it, they're in trouble. So they can probably maintain those. Or the West has made great efforts to try and restrict even that ability. But to go further than that, I mean, the idea that Russia is going to invade the Baltic states and then move on to Germany is just nonsense. They are not stupid. They know that would be suicidal if they attempted to do that. And so they're not going to do that. But they would like Russia to be an important power in the world, with people have to listen to what they've got to say. Finland should be neutral. Ukraine should be neutral, when in effect pro-Russian, if you like, or at least to some extent. That's what we want. Then we're a power. Then we can operate. Then we can sell our oil and gas and our resources, and we can develop our manufacturing, and we can become a bigger power. But then, as going back to our original discussion, they are not going to catch up. They are not going to become a major imperialist power that threatens the US or Western Europe.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. I do worry that through the process of the war, Russia might, kind of radicalize in their aims. And through that process might, create more chaos and destruction. But
you mean in Ukraine, or?
Yeah, in Ukraine. And
well, it's clear that they think they're winning the war. You can debate whether they are or not. And they're prepared to launch at the moment. They're going for it. They're going to gradually take back all the territory in Donbass. I mean, if we're talking about the deal, Putin's offered a deal. The deal is we keep Crimea, which is 95% Russian speaking, by the way. We keep the 4 provinces of the east, which are majority Russian speaking. And Ukraine doesn't join NATO, it remains neutral, and it doesn't build up an army to invade Russia or attack Russia or the provinces. That's our peace deal, which was offered at the beginning in 2022. And of course, the Ukrainians don't want to go along with that. We can discuss why they won't, but that's the view. I think the way things at the moment is neither side can agree on anything. So if you're thinking that the Russian-Ukraine war is going to come to an end this year, I'm increasingly taking the view, no, it isn't.
I was hoping it was, honestly. I honestly was hoping like the one silver lining of Trump would possibly be an end to the Ukraine.
Well, he thought so. It was going to be done in 4 days, wasn't it?
Yeah,
yeah. He said first day of office, he was gonna get a deal hammered out.
Well, that tells you also that Russia is a resistant power. It doesn't just fall over when Trump says you've got to sign a deal. They're not prepared to do it. They're not going to humiliate themselves as they see it. And the Ukrainians are not prepared to accept anything. But let's go back to where we were in 2014 when we had everything. Neither of that's going to work. So this war will go on, I think, until some money runs out.
Yeah, I guess the hope is maybe that the workers on both sides put down their arms and unite,
Well,
and
that would be great.
The Ukrainian Soviet Republic, but
workers government in Russia and a socialist movement in Ukraine to unite together for working people and to build a United States of Eastern Europe. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, but unfortunately, there aren't any signs of that happening. It seems
not really.
The working theory of the the leadership of the European Union countries is that is what Russia intends to do, is to march west.
Yes.
Right up until they get to Germany, and so that
houses of Parliament in London, according to our Prime Minister.
Yeah, but that's also dovetailed with, if we recall, Trump, sort of trying to get the NATO allies to pay more in their fair share.
Yeah.
And now the parliaments of the European Union, at least Germany, I know Germany for sure, are voting to increase defense expenditure. Yeah. So they seem to have the same working theory.
They do. They do. My wife always says to me, they don't really believe that, do they? They don't really believe.
I don't think they do.
I said, well, no, they can't really believe that. But perhaps in a way they are paranoid and do actually believe that this is possible. And there has been a long-standing historical antagonism by the UK administrations going back to the 19th century, imperialist times, against Russia, the great Russian bear. So there is this sort of attitude towards Russia, which is just antagonistic from the beginning. And of course, Germany and Russia have had 2 world wars and fighting each other. So there's a long-standing antagonism towards this power on the eastern borders of Europe. And they cannot imagine that they could be peaceful in any real way. Although the Russians would take the similar attitude. You're telling me that the Germans are going to be peaceful after what they've done in 2 wars. So that all that European internecine war, which has taken place over 300 years or longer, but in the 20th century, there's obviously a leftovers there in the attitudes of the ruling elites, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't believe that they believe that there's an imminent war with Russia. I think that it's a politically advantageous maneuver for them, especially in Germany, which is, I think the right wing in Germany has for some time been trying to rearm Germany or increase the military. And this gives them, I think, the perfect opportunity to do that in terms of Russia, but also the threat from Trump in, collapsing NATO.
We have a Japanese election today, and one of the big ideological things amongst the ruling Liberal Democrat Party is that they want to end the pacifist constitution of Japan. So in other words, Japan should be able to militarize to defend itself against the terrible threat of China. And the main party, the small party that's gaining votes, this populist right party, its main program is anti-immigration and increased military spending. So it's not just in Europe, it's the whole layer of imperialist elites at the moment are looking to develop nationalist and warlike policies aimed with the great bogeymen of Russia in Europe and China in Asia.
Yeah, a lot of troubling parallels to the interwar period in Europe.
Yes. Well, thank you, viewers. That's really, I hope you're all happy now. Well, guys, is there anything else, or are we calling it a day?
Hold on, we had one question. We had one comment I thought was funny. Yeah, if European elites really believed in the Russian threat, they wouldn't spend more money on their militaries, but instead they consolidate their armies into one.
Yeah, well, they have talked about doing that, having a European defense army. This is a big line of Macron. He wants to do that. But the Germans aren't really interested because they haven't really had an army until fairly recently. So the idea of a European defence force would only be possible if the Brits are involved, because they're the next military power. And he's absolutely right, the comment that each of the individual states in Europe are not strong enough. They haven't got big armies. They need to combine that. And I think there'll be more moves in that direction. It's not completely ruled out that we will see attempts to form European defence forces, particularly if the US does withdraw from Europe, which was Trump's original aim. Whether that will ever happen, we'll see.
Yeah, no, it's like on one end, it's like, well, I don't want Europe to have to rely on, us Yankees. But on the other end, I don't want Europe to be rearming and militarizing,
That's
so
never a good sign.
Never a good sign.
It's not a good sign, no.
I got to imagine, though, the U.S. would be working against any attempt to federalize Europe or combine their militaries. It would seem to me,
they're not in favor of this. No, they're not.
Yeah, they would prefer the European countries to be separated and relatively separated than they would, they would
squabbling as much as possible. Yeah.
But I mean, I think the European ruling classes might start seeing the United States as more of a liability than asset soon. So
well, they are. They're panicking about that at the moment. But after having been caught in the headlights like rabbits when Trump launched all these things, they're now trying to get round to their idea that they've got to have a European presence, a European defence, European trade policy, all these things, which supposedly the European Union should have had in the first place. But now it's a militarized approach to it as well. So we'll see whether that actually happens over the next few years.
Yes, we shall see. We shall see. Well, thanks for your time, Michael. I think this will be very informative for our listeners. And I think the two big takeaways are either unemployment is going to go up or prices are going to be going up soon in the United States, and BRICS is not going to be able to challenge the hegemony of the U.S. currency. So
those are my views. I think you can find people who would say the opposite. We'll see.
Yes, we'll see. Feel free to challenge. Feel free to write the cosmonaut if you want to, give us a challenging view. But you've got Michael Roberts on record here. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time and coming on.
Thanks, guys.
It's always a pleasure talking.
Right.
All right.
But real quick, people should check out his blog, The Next Recession.
Yeah, let me get that up here.
thenextrecession.wordpress.com. He writes a lot of good, economic analysis.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, you got to read The Next Recession if you're a Marxist. Yeah, he's got the stuff on G7 that he was talking about. Looks like you published that yesterday. He's got something on crypto here a few days ago. But yeah, Joseph, I don't know if you saw what was going on with AOC and this drama that's going on about the recent vote in Congress.
I heard about it vaguely. I know that she voted for funding for the Iron Dome.
Right. Well, what happened was, I guess there was this big like spending defense bill, and Marjorie Taylor Greene put in an amendment to like cut funding for the Iron Dome and a bunch of other Israeli stuff. And Thomas Massie voted for it, and like 4 other Democrats voted for it. It was like Rashida Tlaib, obviously, Ilhan Omar, and Summer Lee, I think, and can't remember the 4th. But basically, only 6 people voted for it, and AOC didn't vote for it. She did vote against the final bill, which is, I guess is good. But some people noticed that she didn't vote for this amendment. That would have been a good thing to support. So I started giving her shit online, which is what you obviously expect. This is what happens every time AOC does something problematic.
I mean, let's be fair. I mean, we we had a big debate to expel Bowman for doing the same thing, and he actually, I mean, not the same thing because he actually voted for the bill to fund the Iron Dome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did see a tweet where she was trying to justify herself.
Right. I'm gonna bring that up in a second because the tweet, because like at first, like people were defending her, saying like, oh well, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene is an anti-Semite, and AOC didn't vote for it because she didn't want to like support like an anti-Semitic vote, and so you know, and it's not because of that. You know,
yeah, I mean, what's anti-Semitic about it?
There's no, you know, that's a stupid argument because you're letting the right outflank you.
Well, exactly. That's an amendment that really should have been introduced by someone like
exactly.
Taib,
so you're letting the right outflank you, and you know, and she's also voted with like Thomas Massey on stuff like before, so it's not like she's not willing to like vote for things introduced by right wingers that she agrees with anyway. But her excuse is even more stupid than I expected. So hold on, let me bring it up.
Yeah,
it says
I'll be right back. Sorry.
Yeah. Marjorie Taylor Greene's amendment does nothing to cut off offensive aid to Israel, nor end the flow of U.S. munitions being used in Gaza. Of course I voted against it. What it does is cut off defensive Iron Dome capacities while allowing the actual bombs killing Palestinians to continue. I have long stated that I do not believe that adding to the death count of innocent victims of this war is constructive to its end. That is a simple and clear difference of opinion that has long been established. That is true. It has been long established that you have this opinion, actually. I remain focused on cutting the flow of U.S. munitions that are being used to perpetuate the genocide in Gaza. So, yeah, I thought that AOC was like going to like use anti-Semitism and be like, oh, Marjorie Taylor Greene's a fascist, and that's why we shouldn't vote for this because it has like Marjorie Taylor Greene's like fascist cooties on it. But her argument basically is that we need to fund the Iron Dome because it protects Israeli citizens, which is just absolutely ridiculous because this war is not a war where you can make this clean distinction between defense and offense on these. Israel is waging a war of aggression, okay? There's no other way to put it. It's an occupying power, and there's no Israel defending itself, okay? Like Israel is an occupying, colonizing, aggressing power, okay? Like it's not a state that has a right to defend itself, and so AOC basically just made the case that Israel has a right to defend itself in like the most woke way possible, because that's basically what she says here, is that Israel has a right to defend itself, and I'm not going to like cut aid to Israel if it risks that maybe like an innocent Israeli will be killed because that aid will hurt Israel's ability to defend itself.
Yeah, this is a roundabout way of saying Israel has a right to defend itself, but I also find the reasoning here extremely tortured. It's like basically she's saying this doesn't cut off offensive aid, therefore, we shouldn't vote. I voted against it. I think at this point we all understand that the Iron Dome is not a purely defensive construct. The whole purpose of the Iron Dome is to provide Israel a cover so that they can wage offensive operations against other countries.
Right.
Without a fear of retaliation, it gives them much more room for latitude in that sense. So it's one of those things where I just the reasoning to me just doesn't stand up. I really have to wonder what's going on here with AOC.
What is going on with her? Like, she doesn't take AIPAC money. I don't think that she's like.
Is it part of the same process at work with Mamdani right now, where he's being like progressively forced to roll back a lot of what he's been saying about Israel? I mean, specifically the whole globalize the Intifada thing.
I don't even think it's that, because I think AOC is even like, I don't know, because I don't think Mamdani would even go, like, Mamdani wouldn't do something like this. I mean, Mamdani has moderated, right? Like, I have problems with some of the stuff he's done, obviously, and frustrations, but I don't think he's like stabbed us in the back the way AOC has, Like, obviously, some of the stuff he's doing could be like the road to where AOC is now. But this is some other shit. Like, remember the working tirelessly for a ceasefire line about Biden?
Oh. Yeah, I'll never forget it.
Yeah, that
She
was like
liked
a
everyone's
stab in the
face.
gut. That was just like a stab in the gut. Like,
I mean, she lied to everyone's face, and then barely a month after the election ended, all of these reports were coming out about how, like, yeah, Biden didn't do fuck all. Like,
yeah.
he didn't even bring it up.
And it's just, I have long stated that I do not believe that adding to the death count of innocent victims of this war. It's like, you look at, how do you look at this war and look at the death count and then think, oh, the innocent Israelis are being murdered. Like, I don't want to add to the death count of innocent victims by potentially hurting innocent Israelis. It's just like,
I disagree. I disagree. I don't think colonizers are innocent.
I mean, listen, like, the Israelis are not suffering enough consequences for what they're doing. Like, they're too insulated from what they're doing. Like,
no, for sure. I think that if they actually, you know, this might sound fucked up. I don't really give a shit, but if people actually had a real fear that a bomb would drop on their heads in Israel, they might think twice about, you know, supporting the government and what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. That Iron Dome is what allows these people to do what they want with impunity.
Yeah, so it's nonsense. It's not a defensive thing. It's a, you know, I don't buy that at all. You know, like, I don't agree.
Because it's like, and I know everyone's tired of like the comparison of like Israel to Nazi Germany, but it's like saying like, you know, I don't think that we should like fund like the Wehrmacht or whatever, but I do think that we should fund like Nazi Germany's anti-aircraft guns because it will help like defend German civilians from Allied bombings. You know, it's the same kind of like.
That's unhinged. That's an unhinged take.
But that is kind of like what they're arguing, right? Like.
Yeah, I guess the main difference is that the U.S. wasn't funding Germany.
Right, but it's yeah, obviously, but like, it's like we need to. It's like if you actually think that this country is doing a genocide and as this unhinged, aggressive, imperialist, genocidal state that's going on this crusade, why would you fund its ability to defend itself? You know. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, yeah, I'm more interested in understanding like why AOC seems to be not forced, but why she seems compelled to defend Israeli funding for the Iron Dome. In Bowman's case, I can sort of get it. In AOC's case, I don't really understand.
Oh my god, the replies of this are like a left unity jumbly. We got like Aaron Mate, Kyle Kolinsky, Mohammed El Kurd, Haz Al-Din even in here. We got the Gray Zone crew. We got Ugopnik, Zay Squirrel, Caitlin Johnstone.
This is truly the strangest
Ugers in here. We even got some Nazis in here talking shit. Oh my god. Yeah, it's just like everybody has united to hate on AOC. And that's the thing, she gets $0 from AIPAC.
So I've seen some takes from like AOC defenders, and I really don't understand them. Like, I don't understand why, you know, this seems like a pretty clear case of like something to condemn from AOC, no matter what you think about her. Like this to me doesn't seem to have any purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, you know, to get into DSA shit talking, like,
please, let's go.
They I have seen some SMC people like be upset. You know, I mean, some socialist majority people. I had like, I will say like pretty much everybody in DSA like has expressed like anger at the vote. Or at least like, I think the social pressure is there to where like you have to like at least say that you disagree with her and say it was a bad vote, even if you're gonna like, you know, somehow like blame other people for it. Like there was one take that was really funny that hold on, let me bring it up. The DSA National actually put out a statement that wasn't so bad.
Yeah. Well, I expect the National to at least say something.
Yeah.
I don't expect, for example, like the New York City.
Oh yeah, no, this
I'm
guy,
legit-
Steve. Now this guy is like, he's like the DSA rights, like ultimate Twitter troll. Like, me and him love to go at it, and he's kind of become infamous. But he had a take that was like trying to blame the DSA left on AOC, like coming out and like saying what she said. Hold on. He says, does AOC still get up today and defend the Iron Dome if there wasn't a full force freak out yesterday over her votes against all defense spending? We'll never know. But the lack of measured responses and message discipline on the left is a problem for all of us.
I have so much to say about this.
I know, like, bro, like, this is not our fault, dude. It's her fault. There's nobody's fault but her. How can you somehow try to make this our fault for being angry at something she did? Like, what?
I mean, that's sort of the common maneuver from the DSA, right? Is to somehow transmute everything that's wrong to somehow being the left's fault. I just gotta say though, again, like you said, how the hell is this our fault? At the end of the day, she's the one who voted. She has to, she has to be called to account for that. But it's just that message discipline on the left is a problem for all of us. If I recall correctly, it's still right that it consistently sort of fights against any discipline against, I mean, not just message, but in all forms, like all forms of electoral discipline. It's usually the right that is fighting hard against it. So, I mean, sure, but I mean, you have to call into account what your people or like what SMC and the right wing have been doing in order to prevent any sort of discipline. If we voted and we decided that AOC saying this is A-OK, I'd be personally pissed about it, but there would at least have been a process for us to come together and hash it out. But there is no process. You can't blame that on the left either.
Well, they are voting to censure AOC at convention. There actually is going to be a vote to censure her.
Who's introducing that?
I'm not sure, but I could probably find out in a second. But yeah, there is going to be a censure for AOC at convention, and I actually saw some people who used to defend AOC saying they were leaning towards voting yes after this.
That's a good sign, but it's also that it makes no practical difference.
Yeah, no, I feel like expulsion is on the table at this point. Like, it's just, no one will be willing to go that far.
I mean, I could see something like that starting a huge debate and possibly like a discussion about
like, how do you defend the Iron Dome at this point? Like, oh yeah, there was another take from a DSA rightist that was pretty funny. Hold on, let me bring it up.
I mean, my take on this is that Bowman died so that AOC can live.
Well, the thing is like Bowman like improved his position and like he did actually show growth. He did.
Yeah, fair enough.
He lost his election, but
that might also be the reason why he doesn't care anymore. Like, yeah. I don't have a seat to defend.
Well, it seemed like he did kind of change his position before he lost his seat. Like he did like start hating on Israel a bunch. Maybe he didn't fully take responsibility for what he did. I don't know. I didn't pay enough attention. I should have, but hold on. There was another response from this one DSA rightist, Marxist Swifty is their name. We've got a Marxist Swifty who's a big AOC fan. With that being said, hold on. So I actually logged on to defend AOC after yesterday's discourse and was devastated that this is the first thing I saw. I realize now that I was dead wrong, and so was AOC. We shouldn't even be funding kindergartens in Israel, much less their military. Yeah, no, I agree there. We should not be funding kindergartens in Israel, much less their military. That being said, I do think this is because of a lack of political education rather than a fundamental misalignment of values. I personally didn't realize why Iron Dome funding was bad until I read this from Dylan Saba. It's a Jewish Currents article about why the Iron Dome is bad. And it's like, listen, like, I'm sure that's a good article. I like Dylan Saba's article, his writings, but like, this is not a problem of political education, okay? Like AOC has had plenty of time to figure out like what Zionism is, what Israel is, what the Iron Dome is, how this shit fucking works, how this shit, what the game is here. Like, this is not a lack of knowledge on AOC's part. She's not a fucking like college freshman who's just been like thrown into like a fucking, seminar who doesn't know jack shit and is just like being randomly like questioned about stuff. And she has had time to learn. She knows what's going on. She is saying these things because she has thought exactly what she's going to say and has thought very carefully about these things. Is making very measured and controlled and precise political statements that have a very precise and thought out purpose.
I think it's safe to say that if she tweeted it, considering anything a politician does goes through 20 layers of staffers, it's because there's buy-in, and that's what she believes.
Yeah.
And
politicians do lie, but in the end, like, it doesn't, like, what she says is what people hear and what goes into the public. And it is the speech acts that inform the public discourse and the public consciousness, and that's what matters.
When Swifty Marxist says that thing about like this is a lack of political education, I assume that what they meant was like not AOC, but the people who like her, like the people who support her, I guess. But
see, I thought she was saying about AOC's lack of political education. Like, she was just saying that AOC's values are the same as ours. She just hasn't read like the right article to explain to her why the Iron Dome.
At this point, I don't think you can really make that argument. I think there's ample evidence to suggest that no, she just doesn't agree with us.
She's just a liberal Zionist. Like, hold on, let me see if I can find that like thing where she's like talking about anti-Semitism. Like, I don't know. There's like one part of me thinks like, okay, so AOC, she wants to be like Nancy Pelosi in 2060. She's very careerist minded, obviously. She, maybe she came into office thinking she was going to be this progressive firebrand who was going to kind of set things on fire and cause some change, et cetera, et cetera. But then, a few months in, they kind of put her aside and are like, oh, you could really be someone special, AOC. You could really be someone special. But you gotta calm down on this DSA stuff, on this socialism stuff, Socialism, it can be good. You just gotta make sure it's the safe kind of socialism, and and make sure that you make sure that you keep bridges open in the DNC and be careful what you say about Israel. So I remember when Ilhan Omar, like, she got in a bunch of trouble for like, she said it's all about the Benjamins, about the Israel lobby.
Right.
And AOC like had a talk with her.
And what was the basis of the talk?
It was just like AOC explained to Ilhan Omar about how like this kind of language is harmful and how like these anti-Semitic tropes are like dangerous and how like, and she like explained to her how to be more careful to talk about Israel in the future or whatever. Like,
that's some horseshit.
Yeah, such horseshit. Like, when I heard that, I was like, so AOC is like the one that they're like sending after other squad members to like fucking like
the enforcer.
She is like the reinforcer.
No, man, that's so you can't even say the lobbyists are gonna lobby you now without a call or a visit from AOC to tell you why that's anti-Semitic.
Yeah, hold on. There's another. I found the one that was like from this. From this live stream that she did with some like Zionist about anti-Semitism.
I mean, not to let like AOC off the hook or anything, but I do think a lot of that trajectory that you described, that political trajectory, is very much like who she decided to hire to run her office or her staffers.
Yeah.
Because from my understanding, she never broke out of the left liberal milieu of like these sort of left liberal Bernie people who sort of populated her campaign at first.
Yeah, and I think like looking at some of the people Zoran is hiring, that concern is definitely there.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we have to understand that discipline starts with like who we have in these offices and in these rooms that that these people are actually listening to.
Problem solvers. We have to be able to have respectful, evidence-based
your identity. Now, Stacey, to follow up on what you were talking about, how can someone starkly oppose the actions of the Netanyahu government while also avoiding anti-Semitism?
Look, if we want to be problem solvers, we have to be able to have respectful, evidence-based conversations that are totally free of identity-based biases. And if you make a judgment or an accusation about Israel that I think is wrong or unfair, I want to challenge you on the merits. I want to challenge your argument on the merits. And I think we can have those conversations. So Israel is a country like ours. It's subject to criticism and protest and tough language that may hurt my ears that people use to hold it accountable. And the parameters around that should be, how would we speak about this country, right? Political protest and criticism are the essence of democracy. And we also need to take care with that expression because we need it for our democracy. I want to just mention a couple of pain points in this moment, because if we can understand the harm some words do to other people, we can be attentive to preventing it. And that's a great beginning that will matter to a lot of people. So I talked about the conspiracy frame. And so whenever we hear about nefarious control behind world events, or now we're talking about the conflict, evil control of government policy by Jewish billionaires or Zionist donors, those are just like the George Soros accusations.
Oh my God.
Evil puppet master, trying to
see, you can't talk about lobbying. You're not allowed to talk about
cares about. So if your criticism of Israel is trafficking and stereotypes, you're really in the bigotry zone. I mean, stereotypes kill. That's how the Nazis got the German people to live with this so-called final solution. So we do the work all the time to avoid words that correlate with negative stereotypes, and we need to do that here. Second, empathy and care and inclusion cannot be limited only to Jews who reject Zionism. To me, those are part of my community, friends and colleagues, and progressive Jewish groups are doing more good work than ever fighting anti-Semitism. But still, excluding Jews who believe there should be a Jewish homeland is excluding most
we
Jews.
have to hang out with
Jesus Christ.
And that's in our civil rights legal system and our civil society, it's discrimination.
Please don't cancel the Zionists, basically.
And there's a zone in which we don't agree exactly the nature of the overlap between anti-Jewish hate and anti-Israel criticism. We don't have the exact identical frame to characterize it, and Jews disagree on some of these finer points, but we all agree that it's harmful. So let's just call it like eliminationist. Whatever the intent, we're all reading 20 articles a day. It's telling us and teaching us how provocative, scary, and hurtful some language is. Envisioning a world without a Jewish homeland is terrifying for a group of people who've been banished and expelled. And calling every single Jew who yearns for a refuge or a homeland a racist, that causes harm. It's just
what about the Jewish people in France,
that's safe for Israelis,
in Germany,
and
in UK,
and it undermines
US?
our ability to live in the kind of community of support we want and we need.
Your identity.
Oh my God.
What a load of crap.
You're not allowed to call Zionists racist, because Zionists are just Jews that yearn for a homeland. And,
there's so much there, man. Like, first of all,
just, like,
first of all, she says she wants to have an evidence-based dialogue, and then literally, like, not even 3 minutes later, is trying to gaslight us about the fact that Jewish billionaires are not involved in like normalizing, Israeli genocide. Like Bill Ackman isn't having phone calls with business leaders trying to, like that's actually happening. You don't have to gaslight me about that.
Right, exactly. It's like, it's like, oh, I want to have an evidence-based conversation, but then it's like, oh, you can't talk about that because you're trafficking in a stereotype. It's like, shut the fuck up. Like,
well, we have evidence of Jewish billionaires, of particular billionaires specifically, that are going around trying to do the Israeli government's work.
Yeah,
I mean that there's evidence of that. So am I not supposed to mention that because it might offend your ears?
Yeah, it's just this obsession with like, offensive language as being like the ultimate harm, and like, oh my god, like it's doing, like, words are doing harm. Like, you harmed me by saying that Zionists are racist. Like,
I mean, Zionists call themselves racist all the time.
It's just so ridiculous. But like I said, like this is who AOC hangs out with, I guess, these days.
I mean, if you really wanted to get into like conspiracy territory, we could start talking about Epstein. We can get into that. If you really wanted to talk about.
Oh, I don't think AOC is like being blackmailed or anything. Like, I mean, the Epstein stuff, I think we should talk about that a little bit before we log off. But like, I don't think AOC is being like blackmailed. I just think she's dumb. Like, I think like she's trying to do this thing where she's trying to triangulate the position.
Right. The problem is that there is no language, there is no anodyne language that you can use that's ever going to get Zionists or the Zionist lobby to not call you an anti-Semite. The whole point of the debate is so that they can do that. Like they know what power they have with that whole, with the whole concept of anti-Semitism. So
yeah,
it's a losing. That's not a fight you can win. So I think that, rather than being concerned that you're saying something anti-Semitic, which shouldn't be a problem for you if you're not anti-Semitic.
Yeah, just say the truth.
Right, exactly. Just say the
truth
thing.
and then worry about it later.
If you get accused of being anti-Semitic, you can deal with it then for the ridiculous charge that it is. But you're not going to stop the charges. Like, that's, Hasbara doesn't work anymore. So now it's anti-Semitism. That's what they use now.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like that woman in the AOC clip was talking, and it's like, oh, we don't have like the exact language that we can use to like describe the fine difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, and it's like Jews don't always agree on this. It's complicated. It's like that's what they want you to do. They want you to like not speak about this stuff openly and freely. They want you to like constantly think a million times before you say anything, because you're afraid that, you might say something that could be offensive to someone, and you're not unifying everybody possible with every possible thing that you say. And so therefore you're being offensive, and you have to like always frame everything in the least offensive way possible. No, that's not how this game works. And that's what AOC tries to do. Like, as as I think it was a song that pointed this out, she's too woke for her own good. Like, she tries so hard to like please everyone because she wants to be a career politician who's going to be president someday, I guess. Right. And like, she has this idea that she can triangulate the position where she keeps like all of these like liberal Jews who are kind of on the fence happy, and all these kind of like Biden loving centrist Democrats kind of happy. But she's also going to like be like the leftist in Congress who's like standing up for Palestinians and on the side of justice and on the right side of history. But at the same time, she's not going to be like, one of those crazy lunatics. She's going to be like a respectable, like normal politician who can somehow, be the voice of justice on this hot button issue, but still have a normal political career in the DNC. And it's clear that in a situation like this, honestly, like if you really care about your long-term career, the arc of history is bending, I think, and it's in the anti-Israel direction. So I think it kind of makes sense, if you're really smart and forward-thinking, to take a bold anti-Israel stance.
Yeah, she's a consummate politician. She's trying to be all things to all people, and I do think that I don't know this for sure, but I do think that there are machinations probably in her office about running for president, in 2028, and that's basically what animates all of this stuff. I just think the contradictions are becoming way too much to bear. I mean, like, you heard one of them there, which is when that woman said something like, well, how do we integrate, the Jewish people who still believe that they need a Jewish homeland? It's like, well, at this point, haven't you realized that that's like, without enforcing a brutal settler colonial apartheid state, that's not possible to do? So that people are still clinging to illusions like, oh, a Jewish homeland is somehow not racist and not Jewish supremacist. Like, aren't we sort of getting the picture here that we're trying to, we're trying to do something impossible here? We should probably start to, think about what side of history we're going to stand on now.
Yeah, it's like AOC's mind. She is like standing on the right side of history, but she's going to go down in history as someone who just wasn't clear on this issue the way she did like them.
Well, who knows, Donald? We might be voting for her in 2028.
I mean, God, I don't think that's a good idea. Like, I just don't think AOC running for president is a good idea.
It probably isn't, but there, it seems to me that that's where this trajectory is taking us, especially within DSA, which I imagine would go crazy for, the bulk of DSA would go crazy for an AOC president.
Oh yeah, but like I said, it seems like a lot of DSA is kind of mad at her right now.
Give them a week.
Yeah, you're right. People forget.
People
get mad, and then they forget, and they get. It'll be a week, and then they'll be more mad about the de-endorsement stuff. See, if it's like they'll forget about like the latest stupid thing that AOC said, but then like stay mad about the de-endorsement thing.
Well, there's definitely a cycle to outrage. Outrage against electeds in DSA. There's a DSA outrage cycle, if you will. And right now we're in the fresh part of it. All the think pieces will be coming out and the statements will be made. And then in about a couple of weeks or so, it'll be something else.
Hold on. Let me bring up the statement that DSA made about this.
It'll be something else. And it'll be a lot of sort of like emotional blackmailing from the DSA, right? About how, what have you done? What have you done lately? AOC is important.
Hold on. On the Iron Dome vote. Okay, let me put this up on the Jumbotron. Yesterday, Congress voted once again spending more. DSA stand unwavering solidarity with the Palestinian people, of course. This is why we oppose Representative AOC's vote against an amendment. So that's good. Well, the Congresswoman voted against the defense appropriation bill itself, voting against funding for the imperialist military-industrial complex and Israeli genocide. We were further deeply disappointed by her clarifying statement on her position on the Iron Dome. Along with the other U.S.-funded interceptor systems, the Iron Dome has emboldened Israel to invade or bomb no less than 5 different countries in the past 2 years. Isn't that crazy that Israel has bombed like 5 different countries in the past 2 years? It's just so
and like 3 in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
So, yeah, no, I mean, DSA's nationals putting out the correct position here, I think. Providing any aid to Israel as they carry out a genocide with U.S. support is completely unacceptable. This is even more true of military aid of any kind. I mean, we shouldn't be funding a kindergarten. Nonetheless, the Iron Dome, which I think it's funny, Trump wants to build the Golden Dome.
The Golden Dome.
It really goes to my theory that like MAGA is like the American Likud party. Like the Iron Dome, the Golden Dome, and like Likud comes from like Jabotinsky's Zionism, which had the whole concept of the Iron Wall, which was like Trump's whole thing was build a wall. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's definitely some weird like
The the MAGA's the U.S. franchise of the Likud.
Yeah. No, I really do think there's some weird shit going on there. Let's see what else this says. It was Al Green, Ilhan Omar, and Summer Lee and Rashida Tlaib who voted. Who are the Democrats who voted yes on the amendment. So yeah, no, I mean this is good. This is good, and I imagine that it was probably mostly the left-leaning caucuses of the DSA that put that out. So I don't know. AOC is probably she's probably not even going to pay attention to this. She's totally done with the essay, I feel.
Yeah. This is what I was saying earlier. Like, a censure, it's not going to have any sort of practical effect.
Yeah, but at least it's like on the record as
right.
Where we stand as an organization. Because with the endorsement that the NPC did, like people could cry that like, oh, this was the NPCs doing it, wasn't the the actual organization. And
I mean, yeah. I mean, I would even argue that this is a clear grounds for its expulsion, just based on resolutions or conventions passed about anti-Zionism. I would argue that voting to try to protect Iron Dome funding is a form of support.
Yeah, and it's like when we did the endorsement, like she could have gotten the endorsement if she signed on to the conditions. And one of the conditions was to not vote for the Iron Dome, funny enough. So it's clear that like she saw those conditions and was like, oh, I can't. It was clear that was a poison pill for her. But she, for some reason, is like really fixated on having to like support the Iron Dome.
It's gotta be something about her staff or like whoever's in her district or something, because it doesn't make any sense to me otherwise.
And it's just this attempt to triangulate the issue. I think she's trying to like make herself out to be, oh, I'm the progressive, but I'm the progressive that listens to Jewish voices as well.
Triangulate with labor Zionism or liberal Zionism precisely at the moment of its most acute crisis, like, and probably collapse after this point is a move. I'm not a politician or a staffer for one, but that seems to me like quite a move. Like I don't.
Yeah, no, I mean there are conspiracy theories that AOC is like CIA or whatever.
I don't get paid the big bucks to advise anybody, but I wouldn't have advised that. I'll tell you that. Whether she's CIA or not, I mean, we can get into that in the Epstein section.
Yeah. So about Epstein, what do we think is going on here?
What do we think? Well, I mean, obviously Trump is implicated somehow.
Yeah, I mean, did you see the Wall Street Journal thing?
Yeah, I saw the article that they printed with that creepy ass poem in it.
Yeah.
That was wild. The poem was wild. I expected it to be more substantial, but it was short and didn't have that much in the way of new information, I think.
Yeah, I was hoping for like a longer like expose, but
when I heard that he was gonna sue them for releasing it, I thought it was gonna be like a bombshell, like, oh, we got pictures and dates and paper trail.
Well, there already are pictures of him with Epstein.
Yeah, but he's
not him, like,
he stuck to a story with that. He's always said that, like, yeah, I've had some association with them, but I wasn't close, and whatever. Like, we're rich people all run in the same circles or whatever. I was expecting something a little more like, bullseye. Like, oh, you can't wiggle out of this one.
Yeah, hold on. Let me bring up the actual note itself because it's
please, because it's fucking weird.
Hold on.
At first, I didn't think he wrote it because I'm like, I've never heard Donald Trump speak like this.
There must be more to life than having everything. Yes, there is, but I won't tell you what it is. Nor will I, since I also know what it is. We have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Yes, we do, come to think of it. Enigma's never aged. Have you noticed that? As a matter of fact, it was clear to me the last time I saw you. Our pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday. And may every day be another wonderful secret.
Easily the creepiest fucking.
I
book
know,
I've
like,
read.
come on, like, so creepy.
Enigmas never age. What do you think he meant by that?
Yeah, no, that is definitely some pedo stuff.
It's a very knowing no. It's like wink, like a wink. Like, oh, I know there's more to things than life.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Trump was a protege of Roy Cohn, okay? Like, and Roy Cohn, or how do you say that? He was the blackmail master, okay? Like I started reading Whitney Webb's book, One Nation Under Blackmail. And it starts out
that book. It's like 1,000 pages, bro.
Yeah, it's really long, yeah. But it starts out with just kind of like a back history of like the history of US intelligence working with organized crime and blackmail operations. And yeah, there's a long back history of this stuff, obviously, like Meyer Lansky and
right.
But you know, Roy Cohn, who is, you know, obviously they made a whole movie about him and Trump's relationship, The Apprentice, which is a good movie. I actually recommend watching it. But you know, that guy was a master of sexual blackmail, and he learned it from J. Edgar Hoover. So, you know,
that's quite a lineage, by the way. Like J. Edgar Hoover, Roy Cohn, Donald Trump.
Yeah, I just, you know, I know we're in like the area of speculation here, and there's not like hard, cold evidence that, you know, Trump was involved in this blackmail conspiracy, but he's connected to so many people that were involved in this world of deceit and blackmail and pedophile networks. So I definitely think that like when Elon came out and said that Trump isn't releasing the Epstein files because Trump is implicated, I think that might be true.
I mean, broken clock is right twice a day. I think he is implicated for no other reason than, one, they run in the similar milieus. I got to imagine they, you know, living in New York, living in Florida, they were constantly bumping into each other, and I imagine they had business dealings as well. I don't know for sure, but that and just the weird skittish way that he's been acting ever since this became a story, like yelling at the media to drop it, you know, threatening MAGA people from covering it, you know, even sending out, I think he sent out like emails to MAGA like podcasters and stuff to say like, don't cover this or else you're going to get your access denied. So he's acting like a guilty person. He's definitely acting like someone who has had more than a passing acquaintance with Jeffrey Epstein. Like what I kind of want to know though is, because there's still a lot about Epstein's background that no one is clear about. Like from what I understand, his backstory is something like he was a high school teacher at some public school in Manhattan.
Yeah, he was a math teacher.
Right. But then from then until when he becomes Jeffrey Epstein, the financier, seems to be a
black box.
Right, it's a black hole where no one knows what happened. So how did a private school teacher become one of the richest people on the planet, that, you know, high net worth individuals and presidents and other politicians were going to for tax advice? How does that happen?
Yeah, that's the thing, is that there needs to be a real investigation into this stuff, because everyone acts like this is just crank. Like, oh, why would you care about Jeffrey Epstein? That's just what like stupid conspiracy cranks care about. This is not like a serious. This is just salacious, and you know, because if the story is like salacious and, you know, kind of about like edgy, crazy stuff like this, people think that it's like, oh, it's true crime. And that's like what unserious people care about. That's just like entertainment. But this is a serious scandal. Like,
yeah.
This is bigger than Watergate, if you think about it. Like,
I mean, I think it's important to pay attention to it. I mean, just aside from the salacious elements of it, I know that, you know, conspiracy theories are sort of like an iceberg, right? Like, there's the parts that you see, and then there's the parts that you don't. You know, this particular conspiracy, I think there's obviously a lot of weird shit wrapped up in it that's crank, right? But then there's also parts of it that are not crank at all, and are the subject of like fair, you know, legal and political speculation. Like, it's a fact that these people, there's a lot of facts in the stories, basically. So you can't dismiss it entirely as a conspiracist purview, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I really want to know a lot of this stuff because I think it concerns a lot of, like, for example, the finance class, right? And their relationship to the state. That's sort of my interest in it. Because,
because the Whitney Webb book talks all about the Pritzkers actually in this castle bank that they set up in the Bahamas. That was this was in like the 70s and 80s, and it was like this offshore bank that had connection to all of these organized crime outlets, basically. And I think the FBI set up like an investigation, but then the investigation got shut down because they said it would endanger like intelligence connections if they investigated it. So yeah, so it's like there's the world of the formal, open, legal economy that is available in the pages of the financial press for us to see. And then there is, the underground organized criminal economy and the world of the deep state as well that are deeply interconnected. And, this is a whole aspect of the capitalist system that is, because it is kind of esoteric and it's kind of like this black box that we don't have access to, it opens it a lot. There's a lot of just speculation and crank thinking about it that makes it kind of hard to investigate it without going insane. But it is still an important part of how, the world works and how this entire system reproduces itself.
Yeah. I think digging into it will tell you a lot about how the state and, how the state, intelligence, and like finance, for example, interact, and how they're sort of all mutually reinforcing parts of a single state system. I think that, for example, someone like Epstein couldn't have gone as far as he did if, he didn't have control of like a lot of money, and had a lot of connections with people that make knowing him valuable for certain people. Like, for example, Bill Clinton or, the bevy of other, politicians that he had business dealings with. Like, honestly, him being like an agent for Mossad would be the least surprising thing about this, because it would actually explain a whole lot about his trajectory and how he managed to do what he did.
Yeah, no, I'm like 85% sure he worked for Israeli intelligence.
I honestly don't have a doubt. Like, obviously I can't prove it, and I wouldn't hinge an analysis on it, but I do think that he was Israeli intelligence, and specifically the sort of he was an access agent, essentially. Like, he was the sort of person that could get dirt on people because of, how close he could be to them, or if what we think is true is because he could, put them in sexually compromising positions for blackmail. And I think that also explains a lot of why he was so successful as an investor too.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm trying to find something real quick. But yeah, I think like with Epstein, a lot of people look at him as a way of explaining why so many U.S. politicians support Israel, that there was the blackmail network, and I don't know how much that itself explains the support for Israel. I think for that kind of conspiracy to actually like really control like the entire Congress, it would have to be like, that's a bit, that would be a very impressive blackmail operation.
I don't think that's the reason why they support Israel, but I think it certainly reinforces it. But I wouldn't say that. The support for Israel can be explained more or less through imperialist policy, and the importance of Israel to imperialist, hegemony for the U.S. But like I wouldn't like that's what I meant when I said I wouldn't hinge an analysis on it. Like, I wouldn't say that was the reason, but it certainly helps, I think.
Like, when you see like someone like John Fetterman, it's like other Democrats, they say stupid stuff about Israel, and they're obviously like, in the pocket of the Israel lobby. But like someone like John Fetterman, it's like why are you going that hard for Israel?
In
Like,
fact,
do they have like videos of you, dude? Like, do they have something over you that they're dangling? To, like,
bro, in Fetterman's case, that just might be an overdetermination. I think the guy
Yeah.
is sick, like in the head. I think there's something wrong with him psychologically or mentally, and
yeah,
that sort of, you know, it's led him to double down on the whole thing.
I guess it's fun to just like make fun of those types of people and be like, oh, like how many pictures, how many videos of Shin Bet does Shin Bet have of you like diddling like minors? When reality is that they probably are just like evil, stupid, like deranged people who like actually do believe in this stuff. Whereas like people who actually like, are blackmailed by Israel probably don't really have their hearts in it. They're kind of just like performing it and just like, yeah, I voted for $1 billion to Israel because the Jews need a homeland, and this is their homeland, and Israel has a right to defend itself.
What's wrong with the U.S. or the UK or France or Germany or Italy or the you know, dozens of other countries that Jewish people are in now for a homeland?
Yeah, no, it's.
But you know, like Fetterman. I mean, I think Fetterman's just that nuts, honestly. I think his wife wants to leave him. Like I've heard that his wife wants to leave him over that.
I would have gone the hell out of there,
brother. If you're willing to torch your own marriage over Israel, I think you just believe that shit.
Yeah. Yeah. God, Michael Tracy is like, he's on like this like Epstein like contrarian like thing. Where
who's Michael Tracy?
What was that?
Who's Michael Tracy?
Oh, he's like how do I explain like Michael Tracy? He's like a journalist who's kind of like, he's not a centrist, but I don't know, he kind of made a big name for himself like debunking Russiagate. So we kind of got like a big audience amongst like MAGA people.
Okay. He's a skeptic, basically.
Yeah, he's like a skeptic. But then he like went after Trump. So he's like pretty anti-Trump and anti-Israel as well. So, but then I don't know, he's kind of like, he's right about things, but then he's wrong about things. But like sometimes he'll be pretty on point. But like on the Epstein stuff, he's been like really like stupid. He's like, there's no like his whole thing is basically like Epstein was like a lone actor, like, and all of this hysteria about Epstein was just like crazy conspiracy people like being like thrown in the flights of fancy by like conspiracy grifters. And like now that the Trump administration's like in power and has access to the files, like all that's happened is they found out that there's nothing there and they look really stupid. And there's, you know, and so he wrote like an article for Compact magazine basically arguing that like there's no like Epstein like trafficking conspiracy and that like this is all just fake. And yeah.
Yeah, I've been hearing that a lot, especially from older people. I think there's a
lot of liberals will be saying have been saying that for a while.
Yeah. How much of that do you think is them sort of how much of that do you think is them sort of being defensive about, I guess, the supposed connections between Epstein and liberals like Bill Clinton or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's that. I think there's the liberal anti-conspiracy bias. Like liberals tend to just dismiss anything they see as like conspiracy whatsoever to their own.
So this is a conspiracy, but not Russia. Not Russia.
Right. That's the problem is like for some reason, Russiagate wasn't a conspiracy theory.
Even though for Russiagate, no one saw a shred of physical evidence. Like everything was essentially hearsay from people who, you know, originate from intelligence departments. People who are paid to
right. Basically. But for some reason, it just wasn't coded that way culturally. Like it was because it was being promoted by like Rachel Maddow and MSNBC.
Well, let's be honest. It's because it dovetails with the accepted sort of narrative that the liberal leadership offered people, which was that we lost because, you know, Russia cooked up votes or they cooked up social media bots to get people to vote for Trump. It basically, you know, lets them off the hook for losing.
Yeah, whereas like the Epstein stuff is like you can't really talk about that without making like anyone uncomfortable. Like what you're telling me that there was this billionaire pedophile who was running a sex trafficking ring to blackmail politicians on behalf of the Israeli intelligence. Why would I believe that? Like, you're just an anti-Semite. That's what liberals say when you would tell them about Epstein. Like, their worldview kind of like precluded them from like taking it seriously. Like,
I mean,
whereas people like us, like we did take it seriously and we did pay attention to it
Right.
because, you know.
I mean, that's not my only crank belief about Israel either. I mean,
Oh yeah, I mean we have plenty of like. I feel like, you know, the left has done like, I feel like the left has opened its mind to like this kind of stuff. Like, I remember when I was younger, like I grew up like when 9/11 truth was kind of popular, and like I knew people who were into 9/11 truth, and they were kind of just like stupid like Ron Paul
huge.
libertarians who were like not scientific at all about how they thought about this stuff. So I kind of did have like an anti-conspiracy mindset for a bit, you know, when I was a younger Marxist, and I was kind of just like, oh, it doesn't matter like who killed JFK, like the ruling class is going to rule either way, like, you know, it just doesn't matter. But you know, I think around like maybe around like 2019 or so is when I kind of started opening my mind up to like kind of taking this stuff more seriously. So I feel like if you're just going to study history itself, like, you kind of have to start studying the role of intelligence agencies and people call conspiracies.
Right. History is filled with conspiracy theories. I mean, the first thing to keep in mind is that some conspiracies are true. I mean, conspiracy just describes a concerted effort by people or a group of people to do something, right? So by that, you know, some of them are going to be true. I mean, obviously, there are all sorts of beliefs that are fantastical, right? And that sort of gets mixed up with conspiracy theories. But that doesn't mean that, you know, there isn't something there. I mean, in the case of the Epstein thing, I certainly think there's something there.
Yeah, there's got to be something. They wouldn't be hiding it like this. If they wouldn't be changing their narrative this much, they wouldn't be acting this way if there wasn't something there.
I mean, you know, hoax have a place in history. Like, what was that? The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, for example, was a hoax from
the
Tsarist secret police.
Yeah.
You know, that's one of those things where it's like, even if things aren't true, they can still have like an effect on historical processes.
Yeah. Well, now that's the Trump narrative on the Epstein list, is that the Epstein list was planned. The idea of the Epstein list was planted by the Democratic deep state to spread confusion.
You spent the last year saying how you were going to release the list.
Now, and it's funny because now they're calling people who want the list, who want the files to be released. They're saying, "Oh, why do you want the child porn to be released? Why do you want that? Why do you want to see that?"
I saw
you must be a
Tim
pedophile.
Pool. I think I saw Tim Pool say that. That's disingenuous as fuck. Everybody knows nobody wants to watch child porn. What they want,
I know but it's like, you are calling your own base pedophiles for wanting something that you were promising them for the past 2 years. Like, how are you that stupid?
Do you think this is going to have any? I mean, I do see that a lot of Trump people and a lot of MAGA people are sort of, they're upset about this, you know, but how much, realistically, how much do we think that this is going to, like, that he's going to lose a lot of support over this?
Here's Tim Pool. You can't just vote to release the Epstein files because there are victims' videos and photos in those files. The Khanna amendment would have forced DOJ to publish everything. Khanna was asking the DOJ to publish videos of children being raped on a public website. That's just, okay, Tim Pool.
Yeah, disingenuous as shit.
So disingenuous.
Yeah, but, you know, people like Tim Pool.
There's a community note. The Ro Khanna Amendment does not compel the government to publish child pornography. This is a misleading agreement. Just remember about this guy was getting paid by Russia to spread slopaganda.
Look right under that. The community notes is a hoax. Like, this is the problem with like the MAGA sphere podcasters, is that they're caught in a vice now. They're caught in the vice of they spent the last couple of years or so amping their audience up about these Epstein files, about how, you know, the Democrats are involved with deep state, you know, whatever, you know, and now they're caught between that and the fact that Trump is basically telling them to drop it, or else they're not going to get preferential treatment from the White House anymore. And now they're crashing out because they know that they're going to have to resolve this for their base somehow. I think Tim Pool is, you know, crashing out a little more than others right now.
Yeah.
You know, I don't envy these guys because, you know, they're literally their paycheck is dependent on managing these contradictions.
Yeah. And they just look really stupid right now. Oh man.
Oh God.
No, this is amazing stuff. King Mob says, I read so much William S. Burroughs as a kid. Surprising I'm not in. Yeah, no, I read a lot of Burroughs when I was young as well. So
Speaking of
Burroughs, paranoid is someone who knows what's going on, as you said. Yeah, Thomas Pynchon is good to read as well if you're into conspiracies.
Yeah. I never read Pynchon. I did watch
Inherent Vice.
Yeah, I saw Inherent Vice.
Yeah, you should read Crying of Lot 49. It's like a nice short read, good introduction to Pynchon.
I'll check it out since it's so I need a direction right now.
Yeah, no, no, definitely read Crying of Lot. I might reread it soon. I read it when I was really young, so it's been a while. I read Vineland by him recently, which I've always wanted to read, and that was like a really good read because it's kind of like about burned out like hippie, like, you know, revolutionaries from the 60s who get like enmeshed in like this government conspiracy and then like discover it, and then it gets foiled in a very ironic way considering like kind of current events. It's a good read. I definitely recommend Vineland. But I think this is a good place to call it a day. How do you feel, Joseph?
Yeah, I think I mean, more will happen. We can tackle next week's events.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we had a good time chatting with Michael Roberts. We had some good discussion on AOC and Epstein.
Yeah, I wonder what's going to happen next with the Epstein stuff. I don't.
Yeah, no, this Epstein stuff is so crazy to watch it all go down.
I mentioned the crank belief earlier. My crank belief, and obviously I have no way to prove this or anything, but my crank belief is that Mossad has infiltrated the U.S. Congress and has sitting Congress people as their agents.
I think you're right. I think that's probably true. Honestly, like I think they do have assets in Congress.
Yeah, I would leave it there because that's a longer discussion, but.
Well, I think we can investigate this further, Joseph. But on that note, I think I'm gonna call it a day.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us.
All right, thanks for joining us, comrades, and have a good week.
See you.
I see. How do you feel about this action today with all your things out in the street?
I hope that the communists blow you people up, man. You dig? That's where I am. Red China.